The world is shrinking. There's a deep and relatively unexplored world beyond what the human eye can see. The microscopic world is truly alien and truly fascinating. I'm delving further than the microscopic scale. I'm going to explore the potentials of working at a nanoscopic level, working at a level a billion times smaller than the average scale we work at today. This is nanotechnology. Nanotechnology means any technology on a nanoscale that has applications in the real world. Nanotechnology is the science of building small, and I mean really, really small. It's pretty difficult to imagine how small a nanometer is, but let's just take a moment to try and wrap our heads around it. The tip of a pen is around 1,000,000 nanometers wide, so nowhere near close. A single sheet of paper is around 75,000 nanometers thick. A human hair is around 50,000 nanometers thick. And I ran out of things to compare. Let's just take a different approach. If a nanometer was the size of a football, the coronavirus would be the size of an adult male. A donut would be the size of New Zealand, and a chicken would be the size of the Earth. In fact, on a comparative scale, if each person on Earth was the size of a nanometer, every single person on the planet would fit into a single car. A Hot Wheels car. You get the idea, nano is super tiny, we're talking subatomic. So that's how big, or rather small, a nanometer is. But why does it matter? Why look at really small things? Well, they ultimately teach us about the universe that we live in, and we can do really interesting things with them. When we move into the nanoscale, we can work with new domains in physics that don't really apply at any other scale. Nanoscience and nanotechnology can be used to reshape the world around us. Literally. Everything on Earth is made up of atoms. The food we eat, the clothes we wear, the buildings and houses we live in, our own bodies. Now, think for a moment about how a car works. It's not only about having all the right parts, they also need to be in the right place in order for the car to work properly. This seems obvious, right? Well, in pretty much the same way, how the different atoms in something are arranged determines what pretty much anything around you does. With nanotechnology, it's possible to manipulate and take advantage of this, much like arranging Lego blocks to create a model building or airplane or spaceship. But there's a catch, and here's where things start to really get interesting. The properties of things also change when they're made smaller. Phenomena based on quantum effects, the strange and sometimes counterintuitive behavior of atoms and subatomic particles, occur naturally when matter is manipulated and organized at the nanoscale. These so-called quantum effects dictate the behavior and properties of particles. So, we know that the properties of materials are size-dependent when working at the nanoscale. This means that scientists have the power to adjust and fine-tune material properties, and they've actually been able to do this for some time now. It's possible to change properties such as melting point, fluorescence, electrical conductivity, magnetic permeability, and chemical reactivity, to just name a few. But where can we actually see the results of this kind of work? Well, everywhere. There are numerous commercial products already on the market that you and I use daily that wouldn't exist in the same way without having been manipulated and modified using nanotechnology. Some examples include clear nanoscale films on glasses and other surfaces to make them water-resistant, scratch-resistant, or anti-reflective. Cars, trucks, airplanes, boats, and spacecraft can be made out of increasingly lightweight materials. We're shrinking the size of computer chips, in turn helping to enlarge memory capacity. We're making our smartphones even smarter, with features like nano generators to charge our phones while we walk. We're enabling the delivery and release of drugs to an exact location within the body with precise timing, making treatments more effective than ever before. There's quite the list, and that's only a few of the potential applications. Let's delve into a few of these in more detail. Nanotechnology has been pivotal in advancing computing and electronics, leading to faster, smaller, smarter, and more portable systems and products. It is now considered completely normal for a computer to be carried with one hand, while just 40 years ago, a computer, infinitely slower, was the size of a room. This has been made possible through the miniaturization of the world of microprocessors. For example, transistors, the switches that enable all modern computing, have reduced drastically in the briefest amount of time, from roughly 250 nanometers in size in the year 2000 to just a single nanometer in 2016. This revolution in transistor size may soon enable the memory for an entire computer to be stored on a single tiny chip. Increasingly faster systems have also been made possible using nanoscale magnetic tunnel junctions that can quickly and effectively save data during a system shutdown. It's expected that using magnetic RAM, or random access memory, with these nanoscale junctions, computers will soon be able to boot almost instantly. Flexible, bendable, foldable, and stretchable electronics have been developed using semiconductor nanomembranes. They're monocrystalline structures with thicknesses of less than a few hundred nanometers. In normal terms, they're really small and super bendy. They're particularly useful for applications in smartphones and wearable technology, like smartwatches. Nanotechnology is a definite answer to a digital world that is focused on becoming smaller and more efficient, but it can also help us start to clean up some of the world's bigger and more pressing problems. There are many applications for detecting and cleaning up environmental contaminants. It is anticipated that nanotechnology could contribute significantly to environmental and climate protection by saving raw materials, energy and water, and reducing greenhouse gases and hazardous waste. From increasing the durability of materials so that they last longer and reduce waste, to the creation of insulation materials that improve the efficiency of paper towels, allowing them to absorb 20 times its own weight, nanotechnology really has the potential to do great things for the conservation of our planet and the human race. The availability of fresh, clean drinking water is an increasingly pressing issue that can be linked back to population growth, urban mitigation, pollution, and the vast effects of events associated with climate change. Nanotechnology holds the power and promise to not only detect pollutants, but to filtrate and purify. The magnetic interactions between ultra-small specks of dust can remove arsenic. This is incredible, given that it is naturally present at high levels in the groundwater in a number of countries. Similarly, the development of nanoparticles that can purify water pollutants, which cost less than the process of pumping it out of the ground for treatment, also holds great promise. Basically, getting clean water is a huge problem, and nanotechnology can help solve it. This all sounds almost too good to be true. There have to be downsides to the seemingly endless potential of nanotechnology for the environment. Actually quantifying and confirming the effects of a product on the environment, both positive and negative, is achieved by examining the entire life cycle, from production of the raw material to disposal at the end of its life cycle. There is a genuine concern that nanotechnology will further increase energy and environmental costs, given that the production of the nanomaterials themselves takes a large amount of energy, water, and environmentally problematic chemicals such as solvents. In order to produce things that will help the environment, we have to use things that will harm the environment. Scientists are on the verge of new frontiers all the time. Nanotechnology is an act of exploration, and we're very much still in the early stages, but we're closer than you might think to this actual goal. The idea of subatomic disease-fighting machines have been in science fiction for decades, so this idea is not really a new one, but we've definitely come a lot closer to making this idea a reality in the past decade. It sounds like a near-perfect solution to many modern medical problems, but let's just explore how and where science fiction meets fact, and what challenges may lie ahead. Nanotechnology is already heavily incorporated into medical tools, knowledge, and therapies already widely in use. Nanomedicine is the application of nanotechnology in medicine. It's used for disease prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. Nanoparticles can encapsulate or otherwise help to deliver medication directly to cancer cells and minimize the risk of damage to healthy tissue. This could ultimately change the way cancer is currently treated and dramatically reduce the toxic effects of chemotherapy. Suffice to say, researchers are working on it. The increased capabilities of imaging and diagnostic tools enabled by nanotechnology are also paving the way for increased success rates for many different therapies. Quantum dots are tiny semiconductor particles just a few nanometers in size, sometimes referred to as artificial atoms due to their ability to behave like naturally occurring atoms or molecules. Because of those quantum phenomena I mentioned earlier, quantum dots have optical and electric properties that differ from larger particles. As a result, they have many applications and are widely used in various sectors. However, creating quantum dots is an extremely expensive process which generates a huge amount of waste, and we find ourselves revisiting those environmental concerns. Amazingly though, scientists have recently developed a low-cost method to make these quantum dots using some chemicals and green leaf extracts, tea leaves. The procedure is economical and the byproducts are non-toxic. The results are genuinely amazing with heaps of potential. The research proves that the quantum dots created with tea leaves can penetrate the skin and reduce the growth of cancer cells by about 80%. So, not a cure, but a huge leap forward in progress that doesn't come with the environmental payoff. It's not just how we face the big diseases that nanomedicine can transform. Researchers are now exploring ways to grow complex tissues with the goal of one day growing human organs for transplant. Nanotechnology can also improve the way vaccines are delivered and how successful they are, including vaccine delivery without the use of needles. Still a work in progress, though an amazing feat once achieved. But the emerging era in nanomedicine really is the era of the nanobot. Nanorobots are building tiny packages that can complete tasks in an automated way. They hold the ability to sense, respond, detect friend or foe within the body, and deliver payloads and cargo, all at the nanoscale. Why do we need them? Well, conventional water-soluble drugs are far from perfect and present difficulties in treatment. However, diagnostic nanomachines allow doctors to monitor the internal chemistry of the body's organs, providing direct access to diseased areas. Nanobots can also be equipped with wireless transmitters, so that doctors can change the treatment method to respond specifically to the state of the medical condition. They also hold the potential to completely replace pacemakers by treating the heart's cell directly. Research regarding nanobots in medicine offers several opportunities, such as artificial antibodies, artificial white and red blood cells, and antiviral nanobots. They are super durable and could theoretically operate for years without any damage. Nanobots in fact hold the potential to address many health problems besides cancer, such as unblocking blood vessels in hard-to-reach areas, taking biopsies, or measuring the level of certain chemicals in otherwise inaccessible areas of the body. So we are much, much closer than you might have thought, and the field of medical nanorobotics holds considerable promise for advancing medical progress. But the phrase, so close yet so far, comes to mind, because there are many challenges and roadblocks to face before surgical nanobots will reach clinical trials. A few months ago, I made a video on Neuralink, and they're facing the same exact issues we mentioned here. Scientists have numerous challenges to overcome before the potential of nanobots in medicine can truly be realized. Getting the bots to travel safely where we want them to in the body and actually having them stay there long enough to carry out a procedure is incredibly difficult. Scientists also have yet to work out how to keep the nanobots from being destroyed and expelled from the body like any other toxic or foreign bodies. So while nanobots hold the key to an infinitely less toxic solution to treating cancer, the challenges in getting the solution to the stage of becoming a viable treatment are still a bit in the future. We're not quite there yet. However, if past progress is anything to go by, I don't think we're so far off.
From days of long ago, from uncharted regions of the universe, comes a legend. The legend of Voltron, defender of the universe. A mighty robot, loved by good, feared by evil. As Voltron's legend grew, peace settled across the galaxy. On planet Earth, a galaxy alliance was formed. Together with the good planets of the solar system, they maintained peace throughout the universe. Until a new, horrible menace threatened the galaxy. Voltron was needed once more. This is the story of the super force of space explorers. Specially trained and sent by the Alliance to bring back Voltron, defender of the universe.
Voltron, defenders of the universe.
If you could live forever, would you? If you could have all the knowledge accumulated by humans readily available to be downloaded into your brain, would you? These are some of the questions being posed by transhumanists.
Transhumanism.
The biggest thing about transhumanism,
Transhumanism is a philosophical and scientific movement that advocates the use of current and emerging technologies, such as genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology, to augment human capabilities and improve the human condition.
So I often, in dialogue with transhumanists,
Father Michael Baggett is a professor at Rome's Regina Apostolorum who has researched transhumanism. We spoke to him about the goals of transhumanism and what the Church can teach us about man's quest for technological answers to what seem to be spiritual questions and needs.
Father Michael Baggett, thank you so much for being with us today.
it's a pleasure, Ben. Thanks for having me.
What is transhumanism, and why should the Church be focused on this new scientific movement?
Great question. So I like to go back to Nick Bostrom, who is a professor at Oxford University. And years ago, he wrote a frequently asked question, FAQ document, about transhumanism with some of the leading transhumanist thinkers. And he lays out very clearly that transhumanism is fundamentally an intellectual and cultural movement that is focused on radically enhancing human capacities, especially our cognitive abilities, our physical attributes, our moods, emotional life, also possibly our moral life and our lifespan, maybe even reaching immortality, a digital immortality. But this radical enhancement is itself a transition that points us forward to an eventual post-human state, where we will have a superior species, a completely disembodied species, separated from this kind of lump of flesh.
This all sounds very almost kind of science fiction-esque. What does the church teach about this desire to always progress ourselves or change ourselves or transform ourselves to a point where we become unrecognizable?
Yes, so the church has just begun to reflect on this issue, and I would say that we have a great patrimony of reflection that we need to creatively apply to this very new issue. First off, the church can help us in reminding all people of their call to immortality. We should not settle for just this life. We should not settle for just a world of sickness, suffering, aging, and death. We should seek for something more, something better. But we're convinced that Jesus Christ has provided a path not just to a quantitative extension of more of this life, but actually a qualitative elevation, that through the life of grace, we reach this supernatural state. So I often, in dialogue with transhumanists, say that their problem is not that they want too much and the church is here to stop them or prevent them from ambitions, but rather that they want too little. They're settling for too little. So the church gives us many tools to really think critically about biotechnology, but also to keep our eyes fixed on a transcendent, supernatural call.
And Father, these trends and this research, how close are we to arriving to certain of their goals?
Well, it's interesting. You look at some thinkers like Ray Kurzweil, who was working at Google as an engineer there, and he speaks of 2045, the year 2045, as the year of the singularity, the year where man and machine will merge, will achieve super intelligence, machines will be able to replicate themselves, and we'll have this huge breakthrough that will lead us to eternal life. Now, if you look at some of the steps along the way, we seem to be lagging behind the general plan, because this is not something that Kurzweil or Martin Rothblatt or other advocates expect to happen overnight. They think that we'll first get to a greater brain-computer interface. We see the initial stages of that, but it's still only at the beginning. Then eventually we're supposed to get to a point of transferring a human brain to another body or a robotic structure. To my knowledge, we haven't reached that point yet. And then we're supposed to get to the point of mapping out all of your data, tracing your neurons, tracing your memories, your experiences, your desires, your intentions, getting that data, extracting it, in a sense, downloading it, and then transferring a personal file of you, Ben, to a new system, maybe even eventually to the network, in which case you're not bound by any body or structure. So all of that to say that we're at really the very initial stages of what has been promised, and I'm not holding my breath for digital immortality. In fact, I think there are serious philosophical problems with that, because our lived experience is as a bodily creature. We have sensations, and those sensations shape what we think about. When I get to the higher level of conceptual thought, it's always informed by very particular sensations. You know, I don't think about dog in the abstract until I've seen and smelled and interacted with real life golden retrievers, and one particular golden retriever who's barking a few feet behind my left ear, right? So we have these very concrete sense experiences, and those form and shape our higher level thought. So I think that any project that tries to save humanity by removing an essential aspect of humanity, namely our bodiliness, is doomed to failure.
Well, this is all very fascinating. Thank you so much, Father Michael.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Ben.
So I promise you, nothing that I show you today is going to be an illusion. So with that, again, my name is Justin Sanchez, and I'm a neurotechnologist by training. And like was just said, I was at my lab at the University of Miami, and I got a call out of the blue. At the other end of the phone, there was a person that says, we need you to come immediately to Washington, D.C. and come to DARPA. And that's really where the whole story begins. So what is DARPA? DARPA is the high-tech research branch of the Pentagon. And I'm currently the office director in the Biological Technologies Office. And like many of my other colleagues that are at DARPA, my journey to the agency was an opportunity to expand the impact of the work that I was doing in neurotechnology, find new avenues that it could be applied. And I was thinking very deeply about this problem. I was thinking very deeply about the brain. I've always been interested in the brain, but not just from the medical sense. I always wanted to use engineering, apply it to the brain to deepen our understanding of the brain, and then try to find new applications of what we could do with the brain. So whether it's the work that I did in the past or the work that I'm currently doing at DARPA, the goal has always been the same: develop new technologies that enable humans to use their brains to change the way that they interact with others and interact with the world. And while I'm at DARPA, we're thinking very deeply about national security, but what I'm going to show you today is that a lot of the technologies that we're developing go well beyond national security and actually are going to challenge us as humans. So, DARPA got its beginnings in 1958. This is when we started pushing the envelope of things, and that's when in our country we learned about Sputnik, right? The Soviet Union had Sputnik, and the leaders in our country were totally caught off guard by this. And they said, we could never be caught off guard ever again. So the agency was formed with a singular mission: breakthrough technologies. And the agency takes risks where others, like in industry or other parts of government, are unwilling to take risks, okay? So we set off on our mission, and we were trying to make these breakthrough technologies. Now, along the way, we said, okay, if we understand very deeply the science and technology associated with these kinds of breakthroughs, we not only can predict the surprises that may be anywhere in the world, but we can also create a few surprises of our own. Now, while we've been doing this over a vast number of years, one of the things that did emerge from all of our work is it's not the technology alone that makes all the difference. It's how the people of the world use the technology that we develop, okay? That's the fundamental game changer in all of this. And a terrific example of all of that is the smartphone. So all of you probably have one or maybe even two smartphones in your pocket, and you may not know that a lot of the technology that's in the smartphone has its roots in DARPA. So Herb mentioned the internet, GPS, which enables us to find our phones or locate where those phones are. The touch screen that's on your phone that enables you to interact with it, that was a DARPA development. The accelerometer that's in the phone that enables you to change the orientation of the screen as you rotate the phone. Siri, also a DARPA technology development. And all of those aspects, again, while they had their roots in national security, came together in this small device, and it changes the way that we perceive our world and the way that we interact with our world, okay? Now, what I'm going to show you today is not the smartphone. I'm going to show you a new way that we're developing technology to interact with the world for the future. And that's really the technology of the brain. Now, the brain is an amazing organ. When it functions, there are millions and millions of neurons that become active, and they send signals not only to their neighbors, but also to very different parts of the brain. So to a person like me, the brain is not a black box. The brain's not just this goop in between your ears. It's a very intricate and elegant signaling of all of these neurons and how they evolve over time. And what we've done at DARPA is develop the technology in order to sense these signals in real time or even write signals into the brain. And today I'm going to show you a few examples of what that technology is and how it actually came to be. Now, what's really important in all of this is that at DARPA, when we think about the brain, we think about the people we serve. So make no mistake about it, we're a part of the Department of Defense, and we serve military personnel. Now, the part that really struck me so much when I came to DARPA was how hard a job these military personnel have to protect our freedoms, protect our families, and protect our way of life. So again, when we think about the brain, we think about their job to control complex systems or learn complex tasks. They're under unbelievable stress, and then ultimately a lot of these people make the ultimate sacrifice and actually get injured. And some of our most early programs at DARPA have been to develop neurotechnology to restore those people back to their more whole self or their more natural self. Okay, so think of direct interfaces to the brain to enable somebody to move again after they've been paralyzed in service of the country. Okay, now what we've learned along the way in all of that is that those discoveries, right, those technologies are opening the door to a whole new set of possibilities for the future. Okay, so how do we do all of this? So this may be your first time hearing about a direct neural interface. And in the middle of the screen up there is actually an example of one of the types of neural interfaces that we're using in humans today. So this is a sensor array. It's about 4 by 4 millimeters. And on this sensor array, there are 96 sensors. Each one of the tips on that little array can detect between 1 and 3 neurons in your brain. All right? And we have the technology in order to identify those neurons, amplify their activity. There's minuscule signals actually happening in your brain. We can send those signals into a computer, and that computer can interpret what all of those signals actually mean when you're thinking about trying to do something. And we can place these sensors anywhere in your brain or even in your peripheral nervous system, right? These are the nerves that are outside of your brain, okay? So while you may have thought of neurotechnology, as I've just described to you, as being something way off in the future, it's actually a technology that exists today, and we're actually using it with humans. Now, how did we get here? Okay, so again, I'm telling you about something that you may not be familiar with, but we actually have a history of working in neurotechnology. And it turns out that in the early 2000s, neuroscientists like myself didn't even know if it was possible to read out, let's say, 100 neurons of activity in real time from an awake-behaving individual. So we started in animal subjects. We said, okay, let's try these sensors out. Can we read out the signals in real time? And can we do something simple like control a robotic arm? And we showed that we could actually do that, just having the animal think about it. And once we proved out that technology in 2005, we said, okay, we're ready to go to humans. Can we place the same technology in the human brain and restore the ability to move and even sense after you've been injured? And I'm going to show you a couple examples of this. Yes, we could do that. And we said, okay, again, this is DARPA. We try to push the limits of what's possible. We said, okay, if we can do that for movement and sensation, can we try to do something even more complex? So we went to memory in the human and said, okay, for humans with traumatic brain injury, could we restore their ability to form and recall memories? Again, direct brain interface. Now, here's one thing that may blow your mind. The kind of questions that we have to go after here are answering things like, what is a memory in your brain, right? Have you ever thought about what a memory is, what those intricate neural firing patterns actually are, and how you need to interact with them in order to facilitate memory formation and recall? That's the scale of the problem that we're actually working on at DARPA. Again, being DARPA, we don't just stop there. We keep moving forward in our trajectory. I actually started a new program in 2013 called Subnets, thinking about the sub-networks of the brain, but for the most challenging problem of neuropsychiatry, and that's mental states. Right? Think about depression and anxiety. Think about trying to develop a direct neural interface to help people with their depression and anxiety. And again, the same questions are there. What actually is depression in the brain? What are the neurons that are involved in anxiety? Those are the kinds of things that we're ultimately going after. Okay, so we have a very long trajectory here, right? Over a decade of work in this space. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to show you some examples of the achievements that we are able to do today, and then paint a picture for you for what the future of neurotechnology may ultimately hold for us. Okay? So the first person I want to introduce you to is Nathan. He's the one on the right side of the screen. And Nathan is living with paralysis. He was paralyzed in 2004 in an automobile accident. And Nathan was actually a freshman in college. He was studying nanotechnology, and when he heard about some of our studies, he said, I want to be a pioneer in that. So he signed up to do one of our studies, and Nathan had that same array, right, that 4 by 4 millimeter array, placed in his motor cortex, right, the part that is involved in movement. He had another set of arrays placed in his sensory cortex, okay? And you can actually see on the upper right side of the screen there's a little plug that's coming out of his head. That's where those arrays are connected to. And the wires send the signals from his brain actually to that bank of a rack of computers in the middle of the screen, process all of his neural activity in real time, and actually send that activity to that robotic arm. We also developed the robotic arm, and he met President Obama, was able to think about moving the robotic arm, and shook the president's hand. Okay? Now, the other part of this story is that that robotic arm also had sensors in the fingertips. So when the president placed his hand on the robotic hand, the force transducers took that information and did the reverse, went back through the computers, went back through the wire, back into Nathan's head, and he could actually feel the president's hand on the robotic hand. It was truly a remarkable moment. Okay, so that's what Nathan can do. Let me show you a video of something else that Nathan can do. All right? So this is Nathan taking these cones, and he's kind of building this structure. He's doing all of this just by thinking about it. You can see he's not moving his own arms. He's just producing the neural signals directly from his brain and stacking those cones. Right? So think of this, right? You're a paralyzed person being able to interact with the world in this way. It can really be transformative for you, right? You have a new way to project yourself onto the world. All right, so Nathan, he was astounded by this moment. It's life-changing for him. But we asked him, Nathan, what else do you want to do? And he's a gamer, and he said, I want to fly an aircraft. So we said, okay, we can help you to fly an aircraft. So the next thing we did is we connected him to a F-35 Joint Strike Fighter and put him out over Las Vegas. And we basically remapped his neural activity onto any control surface that we ultimately wanted to on that Joint Strike Fighter. Again, put yourself in the place of Nathan. Think about how you're locked in this wheelchair, and then think about your ability to actually control this aircraft, change your perspective of the world, and see it in a very different way. And I think that he sees Las Vegas in a very different way now that he's able to fly over. And Nathan started having a lot of fun with this, and at the very end of this run, he's like, I'm just going to do a barrel roll here, and did a barrel roll in the aircraft. And it just kind of shows you the creativity that a person like Nathan with a direct neural interface, what they can ultimately do. So that's what we can do today. What does the future look like with these kinds of technologies? Okay, so think about building with your brain. Think about changing your perspective of the world by flying over a city with the brain. So in this vignette, this person is an architect, is paralyzed, lost control of his arms. He needs a new way to communicate his ideas. So through his direct neural interface, he can connect to his drafting software, position buildings anywhere he likes, the details of the building. Maybe he can even connect to a collaborator out in the field to get a different perspective on the building, okay? And imagine, in the future, building a skyscraper just with your brain, just with the perspective of your brain. It could be transformative. All right, so that's Nathan. The next example I'd like to show you is a person, his name is Doug, okay? And Doug was injured 25 years ago in a near-fatal electrical accident. And Doug's very different than Nathan in the sense that he has no hands on both of his arms. He lost both of his hands. Imagine living your life that way. But for Doug, we also explored the possibility of a direct neural interface for him. So in this particular case, it took that same sensor array, but instead of placing it in the brain, we placed it into the nerves of his forearm. You can actually see on the right side of the screen there his residual limb, and that's where that sensor array is. Now, what's different in this picture is that we connected his peripheral nervous system to that 3D virtual environment that's in the center of the screen. And there's a virtual hand there, and it's going to be touching a virtual door. And whenever the virtual hand touches the virtual door, signals are sent back into that electrode array, into his nerves, and this is what Doug can actually do with that interface.
Oh my God, I just spoke to the door. Oh yeah.
Can you feel the finger sliding when you do that?
Yeah, actually I can. Bring it around her. God, that is so cool.
And it is cool, right? You can imagine working in that 3D world just through your nervous system. It really is amazing. So when we see something like this, we say, can we change the future? Can we change the way that we even play, right? So imagine in the future you had a direct neural interface, And that direct neural interface gets you off your couch in a virtual way, enables you to explore virtual worlds just through your direct neural interface. And we've got game controllers and cameras that do this now, but it's nowhere near the kinds of things that I'm talking about here. Again, exploring your cognitive space in this virtual world could be transformative. What if you could even connect to your friends all across the globe through your direct neural interface and kind of explore what that would actually be? Okay, so what we're doing today with Doug is just the beginning of what we think is possible in the future. Okay, so the last example that I like to give for you today is in something much more difficult. It's in that area of memory. Okay, remember, memory is a very tough concept. In this particular case, there's a person that has volunteered for our studies. This person is living with intractable epilepsy, has seizures that are uncontrollable. And part of their therapy is that they come to the clinic and they have sensors placed in and on their brain in order to try to map out where this problem is occurring. And it turns out that some of the places where those sensors are located are in the memory structures of the brain. And we ran a test where we asked the question, could we develop a direct neural interface, stimulate the brain, in order to facilitate memory formation and recall? And this is for declarative memories, memories about facts. So this is how it goes. In this particular example, the person has to recall 12 words. We know how hard it is to do something as mundane as that, right? Think of phone numbers and things like that. In this case, we do it with brain stimulation and without brain stimulation. We're going to sense his cognitive state, and when we detect that memory is low, we stimulate the brain in order to facilitate its ability to do it. So the first example is without stimulation, and let's see how good he actually does. 12 words, no stimulation. So we got through 3 of them, and we've all experienced this. He does the old face palm, can't get through the rest of them, right? So now we're going to do it with direct brain stimulation.
Snail, sea, cloud, Zeus, moth, plane, thread, dark, wood, sky. No kidding.
Got all of them.
A good picture in my head.
And that was the breakthrough moment for us. He said, I had a good picture in my head I could just see. It was the moment we knew that we were having an effect on his memory circuit. Okay? So transformative moment for all of us that were involved. So what does the future look like? Well, imagine as you're getting older and you have a more powerful form of this kind of neural interface and you're feeling maybe a little nostalgic and you want to record some of your memories. Maybe there's a possibility of using a direct neural interface to actually do that. And maybe you use that neural interface to record the moment you went on a first date, maybe the first time you proposed, or even the birth of your child. And then if you even had the ability to share those sets of memories with your friends and family, it could be transformative for how we ultimately live our lives. So, recall back to the examples I gave you with GPS and the internet and Siri. Those all came out of Department of Defense kinds of technologies, but they ultimately came together in a way that changed society. And we think that in the future that neurotechnologies like the ones I just showed you are going to be picked up by commercial entities, right? They're going to use neurotechnologies in the future. And at DARPA, we create these breakthrough technologies in order to change the future and change the world. That's what we do. That's our mission. Whether it's for a person to try to command and control a complex system, or it's a person that has extraordinary injuries and we brought them back to a more normal quality of life. We know that these technologies are extremely powerful, and we also know that they can be used for good or for ill. And without a doubt, these kinds of technologies are going to introduce new societal questions that we're all going to have to address. And just a few to consider. Will neural enhancement be considered a personal choice like laser eye surgery or even braces? Will there be a huge disconnect between the neural enhanced haves and the have-nots? In the future, will neural enhancement or some form of neural enhancements be considered a right, instead of a personal choice? These are just some of the questions that we have to think about, and they're not just questions for the technologists here, they're questions for all of us. So how the future of this very powerful technology unfolds really depends upon all of you. And as we shape that future, and we really make choices associated with that future, it's the choices that we make that will define us as individuals, and it will really reveal who we are as a society. So, as I've shared with you today, the brain is an extraordinary organ. It has the potential to completely change the way that we interact with technology. So whether it's building with your mind, right, thinking of a new perspective of the world with your mind, changing the way that you play and interact with your friends, right, or even finding new ways of recording and sharing your memories. These are all the possibilities of the future. And it's DARPA's push into these very difficult areas which is making all of this possible. And that really sets up the last question for the discussion today is, what will you accomplish with your brain in the future? Thank you so much.
Mutant chain reaction, living underground. Jitsu action, it's a shell of a town. Turtles count it off. Live by the code of the martial arts. Never fight unless someone else starts. Always stick together no matter what. If all else fails, then it's time to kick back. There's no one better.
Watch out for Shredder.
They're like no others. Those teenage brothers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Over the years, many fatal illnesses have been overcome, many human weaknesses rendered obsolete, and the life expectancy of humans has increased significantly. This is all good news for you, for me, and all of humanity. But technology will keep evolving, and with it, the ambitions of those scientists working on empowering us as humans. Is there a limit to these ambitions? Is it possible that with such ambition and technology we are going to be humans with superpowers? Will we still be human? And are there hidden intentions behind the movement they call transhumanism?
Crashed into one of the towers of
I once broke my hand as a child while playing. On my way to the hospital, I imagined having it replaced with a bionic hand. I must have seen it in a movie and thought it looked cool. I went back home that day unfulfilled, with just plaster on my hand.
We know that it's not against the laws of business.
This is a well-known marketing strategy.
If you're valuing different lives in a different way, this could very well lead to a war.
Things have changed, and maybe it's time for my childhood dreams to come true. Implantable defibrillators can restore your heartbeat. Smart contact lenses can record video. How far can technology lead the evolution of the human body? How much better can we become? And is it all driven by the intention to live a better life? I've always believed in endurance and the power of will. No pain, no gain, as they say. Life has taught me that the only way to improve is through exerting effort. Is that still true? Maybe what I believed all my life is now obsolete. It is already outdated by today's scientific advances. Biotechnology aims at shattering our limits, at having improved versions of ourselves, bypassing endurance and even the power of will. Is that what transhumanism promises? We've always used technology to support our bodies. There are people who use crutches or dentures and many other forms of support. But they say that transhumanism is a complete revolution. But is it something that can make our lives better? The best way to know is to talk to someone who has gone through this process in person. In my research, I found Rob Spence. He's a filmmaker who is blind in one eye, and 9 years ago, he replaced his eye with a video camera.
Hi, Rob. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me.
My pleasure.
What is transhumanism for you?
For me, transhumanism is a term that journalists and academics have come up with. I guess I'm a transhumanist, but what it means is people that add technology to their bodies.
Can you tell me why did you decide to install a camera inside your eye?
I had an accident with a shotgun when I was 9. By the time I turned 30, the doctor said you should remove your eye. But by that time, I had become a filmmaker. I just thought, why don't I call some engineers and see if I could put a camera in there.
How do you think we can use technology to make our bodies better?
I know a lot of people who've added technology to their bodies, and for many people, it's because they lost a part of their body. I think in general, the main way technology will join the body is stuff like this, like your phone. But a phone is a powerful computer, and it just keeps coming closer to the body. Elon Musk, for example, is looking at ways to add a neural lace to the brain. And he, in fact, says that using your thumbs all the time is barbaric.
Do you believe that this will be the future? We will become a hybrid between organic beings and technology?
Yeah, artificial intelligence and human beings are destined to join. There's a whole idea that you can become more than human. I'm a guy who lost his eye, and I wanted a cool eye camera. That's where I'm coming from. But before, I felt like just a guy who lost his eye. Now that I have an eye camera, I feel a bit cooler. I feel nicer. I feel better. I feel more technological. I used to read a lot of comics, and I would see these guys with glowing red eyes. I have a glowing red eye now. So I'm happy. I'm a homo excelsior.
Rob Spencer's experience in transhumanism makes sense. Something in his body stopped working, so he exchanged it with something artificial. But this is not the only drive behind transhumanism. What about improving organs that function without problems? Is this the ultimate aim of transhumanism? A better human life? Or is this just a story to cover other hidden intentions? I've easily found many voices against transhumanism, but it wasn't that easy to find one of the better informed experts. He is the author of a revealing book on the subject. His name is Antonio Dieguez, professor of philosophy at the University of Malaga. I asked him if there could be hidden interests behind transhumanism.
There are several interests behind transhumanism. Economic and power interest. It's no accident, for example, that the big tech companies in Silicon Valley are so clearly supporting the transhumanist discourse and are financing with large amount of money projects that create transhumanist inspiration. They repeat the idea that artificial intelligence will change completely our life in near future. This is a well-known marketing strategy to sell their products in artificial intelligence system, for example.
It is easy to take a position against transhumanism as one watches from a distance. But if we watch our closest and dearest people grow older, weaker, and become in pain, then our position may be different, and we would probably do anything to help them. But can transhumanism really eliminate pain? Stop aging? Can it prolong the lives of those we love? Is it possible that transhumanism has a long-term goal to eliminate death? That the human species becomes immortal? I've found that Better Humans is the world's first specifically transhumanist biomedical research organization. They focus on the effects of aging, and its president, James Clement, can tell me all about it. Hi, James. Thank you for talking to me.
Nice to see you.
I wanted to ask you, what is transhumanism?
Transhumanism is really the idea that you can use these so-called exponential technologies like nanotechnology, biotechnology, information science, artificial intelligence, and cognitive science or neuroscience to allow humans to exceed our evolved genetics.
So, are we trying to make our lives easier, or are we trying to reach immortality?
If you want to be a super centenarian, someone who lives to 110 and is still gardening at 107, 108 years old, still riding a bicycle, then you first have to get to 99. Maybe we get there, maybe we don't. But we know that it's not against the laws of physics. We have bowhead whales, mammals like us, that are living to 200 and longer. So we know this is possible.
So immortality is not exactly the station, but rather the direction.
Correct. Very well put. I think the first objective really is to diminish human suffering.
Okay. What about in the long run? Do you think immortality can become an objective?
I think that immortality is more of a philosophical question. I think the best terminology is maybe something like indefinite lifespan. But whether people even choose to live beyond, let's say, 1,000 years or 10,000 years, I think we don't know. We don't know at what point, people may choose not to live further.
Immortality. Death is inherent to life. How could we be both human and immortal? Birth and death are the constant truths in our existence. Now they say that in the future, we will be born in a different way, and that we will not die. By the way, this isn't just an expensive toy. This is the future. All of us, one of these days, will have similar hands. Can you imagine? Imagine we live without pain. Can you imagine if you play the guitar with a hand like this? Where your level of accuracy and speed will be? No, dude, thanks. I don't agree with this. I love my hand on my guitar. Because you're an antique, man, and you like pain. Pain is something very important in life. It teaches us many things, and then it passes. But the goal of medicine since it was established is to reduce pain and extend the lives of people. Isn't this the same thing as well? That we alleviate pain is something, and to live longer is something, but that we stop dying is something completely different. Whatever, dude. As you wish. Stick to pain. There's a folk proverb that says, "May God grant you eternal life." I never thought that one day this would be so literal. Is science aspiring to divine powers? In our culture and history, we learn stories which tell us that every time people tried to play God, they were demolished by God. Like Pharaoh with Moses, Atlantis, and the people of Ad, and many other tales. Do we really want this? What does it morally imply? I need to find someone of a different background. Tamim Mubayyad is the person to speak to.
اهلا استاذ تميم، متشكر ان حضرتك قبلت الدعوه ومش هاخد من وقت حضرتك كتير.
Amr, it's an honor to speak to you.
انا عندي سؤال بخصوص الترانس هيومانيزم او اللي بيسموه ما بعد الانسانيه. ما هي المشاكل الاخلاقيه التي تنتج عن الترانس هيومانيزم؟
You know, it's one of the key questions for this whole debate. Issues like autonomy. Well, it begins maybe with the parents making decisions about the physical makeup of the child, maybe even the state at some stage coming in and making decisions about the genetic makeup of its citizens. There's also issues of justice. There's a scholar called Musa Ferber, and he talks about there being a nano divide, i.e. a divide in access to nanotechnologies. Another interesting concept from Jürgen Habermas. He makes a differentiation between what's grown and what's made. And I think that's key to the human condition. We're supposed to struggle with things. We're supposed to overcome challenges. We're supposed to be challenged.
طيب من وجهه نظر دينيه اسلاميه تحديدا، ايه هي مشاكل الترانسهيومانيزم؟
One of the concerns from an Islamic perspective is the idea that comes from Nick Bostrom. He talks about humanity being a half-baked creation. In the Quran, there's this idea that we have the potential to be so high, but we also have the potential to go low. And that's part of the divine plan, is that we have the choice. I think what transhumanists want to do is they want to take that away. I think from maybe looking at the Islamic idea of jihad al-nafs, i.e. struggling against the self, challenging the self, battling against the self. As we all know, that's a lifelong journey. And sometimes we do well and sometimes we don't, but we learn from it. Transhumanism, I guess, is looking to bypass all of that.
حضرتك في ناس بتقول ان الترانسهيومانيزم بيحط جوهر الانسانيه في خطر. هل حضرتك موافق على الكلام ده؟
Transhumanism is probably one of the fruits of the Enlightenment. And another one of the fruits of the Enlightenment that came, in the Western world is utilitarian ethics, where essentially you can value the harm and you can value the good and you make the decision of what brings about the most good for the most amount of people. But if you dig a little bit deeper, what you do then off the back of that is you can value human life. And you could, in theory, say one human life is worth more than another human life. If you're valuing different lives in a different way, it's very easy to see how somebody who's quote unquote genetically enhanced is worth more than somebody who isn't. Some thinkers say that this could very well lead to a war.
Technology is something amazing. A bionic hand would surely be more accurate, but I'd rather have my imperfect human hand. I want to feel the strings, to transmit the passion, and to have a hint of transcendence. This imperfect hand creates a unique sound with every experience and every instant of my mortal life. I want to be mortal for two reasons. The first is that without death, there is no life. The second is that immortality is for God alone.
again, one preparing himself to sail and about to pass through the raging waves, calleth upon a piece of wood more rotten than the vessel that carrieth him. For verily desire of gain devised that, and the workman built it by his skill. But thy providence, O Father, governeth it. For thou hast made a way in the sea, and a safe path in the waves, showing that thou canst save from all danger. Yea, though a man went to sea without art, nevertheless thou wouldest not that the works of thy wisdom should be idle. And therefore do men commit their lives to a small piece of wood, and passing the rough sea in a weak vessel, are saved. For in the old time also, when the proud giants perished, the hope of the world, governed by thy hand, escaped in a weak vessel, and left to all ages a seed of generation. For blessed is the wood whereby righteousness cometh, but that which is made with hands is cursed, as well it as he that made it. He, because he made it, and it, because being corruptible, it was called God. For the ungodly and his ungodliness are both alike hateful unto God. For that which is made shall be punished together with him that made it. Therefore even upon the idols of the Gentiles shall there be a visitation, because in the creature of God they are become an abomination, and stumbling blocks to the souls of men, and a snare to the feet of the unwise. For the devising of idols was the beginning of spiritual fornication, and the invention of them the corruption of life. For neither were they from the beginning, neither shall they be forever. For by the vain glory of men they entered into the world, and therefore shall they come shortly to an end. For a father afflicted with untimely mourning, when he hath made an image of his child soon taken away, now honored him as a god, which was then a dead man, and delivered to those that were under him ceremonies and sacrifices. Thus in process of time, an ungodly custom grown strong was kept as a law, and graven images were worshipped by the commandments of kings, whom men could not honor in presence, because they dwelt far off. They took the counterfeit of his visage from far, and made an express image of a king whom they honored, to the end that by this their frowardness they might flatter him that was absent, as if he were present. Also the singular diligence of the artificer did help to set forward the ignorant to more superstition. For he, peradventure willing to please one in authority, forced all his skill to make the resemblance of the best fashion. And so the multitude, allured by the grace of the work, took him now for a god, which a little before was but honored. And this was an occasion to deceive the world. For men, serving either calamity or tyranny, did ascribe unto stones and stocks the incommunicable name. Moreover, this was not enough for them, that they erred in the knowledge of God. But whereas they lived in the great war of ignorance, those so great plagues called they peace. For whilst they slew their children in sacrifices, or used secret ceremonies, or made revellings of strange rites, they kept neither lives nor marriages any longer undefiled, but either one slew another traitorously, or grieveth him by adultery, so that there reigned in all men without exception blood, manslaughter, theft and dissimulation, corruption, unfaithfulness, tumults, perjury, disquieting of good men, forgetfulness of good turns, defiling of souls, changing of kind, disorder in marriages, adultery, and shameless uncleanness. For the worshipping of idols not to be named is the beginning, the cause, and the end of all evil. For either they are mad when they be merry, or prophesy lies, or live unjustly, or else lightly forswear themselves. For insomuch as their trust is in idols which have no life, though they swear falsely, yet they look not to be hurt. Howbeit, for both causes shall they be justly punished, both because they thought not well of God, giving heed unto idols, and also unjustly swore in deceit, despising holiness. For it is not the power of them by whom they swear, but it is the just vengeance of sinners that punisheth always the offense of the ungodly.